What's up, guys? Welcome back to Blondes Building Equity. Today is a really exciting episode because we don't have someone real estate, but definitely financial based. So this is Jeremy Schneider. He is retired. He retired at 36 and now focuses on index funds. So this is definitely more of a safer investment, especially when you're following someone like Jeremy and he coaches people along the way for this. So we're really excited because real estate is definitely in the dumps right now. We're taking a hit. I know all of you guys that are listening have been taking a hit, calling us. What do we do? So we wanted to give you guys an alternative of another option of investing. So welcome on, Jeremy. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, Kinsey, Jessica. It's great to be here. Thank you for having me. Yeah, my shtick is that I retired at 36. It's actually because I started an internet company in college and sold it when I was 34 for just over $5 million. But baked into that story is when I was investing, while I was growing the company, I was living below my means. When I sold the company, I didn't spend all the money. And since then, I've been living below my means. And with all that excess cash I wasn't spending, I've basically been investing very simply along the way, which has basically given me financial independence. Now I don't ever need to work again. My investments continue to grow. And, I think that's kind of like the point of money is to like make your life what you want out of it.
Right. And I was just telling Kinsey before we started this, it's one thing to make a big chunk of money because I know a lot of people that more or less in LA have made a big chunk of money, but to be able to keep that money and to grow that money, that's another level of intelligence and patience that a lot of people could learn from. So how did you, when you first made that money, how did you kind of understand what to do with it? Were you always kind of into stocks and like financial literacy?
I was fortunate. I had, parents who were good with money. And when I was a teenager and I got my first job working at a summer camp, my dad helped me open up a Roth IRA and choose mutual funds to go in this IRA. I thought that was like a very typical childhood experience. You open up your IRA and you choose your mutual funds. Then when I was like in my 30s, I would talk to my friends about their IRAs and mutual funds, and they would like have no idea what I was talking about. I was like, oh okay. God. So I got a little bit of a head start. When I sold my company, there's this weird period of time where we basically shook hands on the price of the company, but then there was a due diligence period of about 3 or 4 months before like the check cleared and came into my bank account. Yeah. And so for like 3 months, I was like expecting this. And I was, up until then, I was basically poor. I was living on $36,000 a year. I was the lowest paid employee at my company. I was driving a 99 Ford Explorer, living with roommates. And I just kind of like you said, I didn't want to be one of those stories that you hear about where a garbage man wins the lottery. And then like 3 years later, it's like a garbage man again.
Yeah.
And so during those few months, I started reading books. I was like, all right, I'm going to read all the books on investing. And I read like 3 books and I was like, okay, all these books say the exact same thing. And it's not a message that you typically hear in pop culture. In pop culture, you hear about like, fancy cars and Amazon and loans and debt and credit scores and just like all this stuff. And it's like, the truth is like very simple, which is like you spend less than you make and then you take the difference and you invest it very simply. And like the simpler the investment generally, and this is not true for real estate, by the way. I feel like this is a very stark contrast. There are some things that are very similar between real estate and investing in the stock market, but in real estate, it's like a very active business, like kind of like the more hustle. Like actually the last show of yours I listened to was the flipper flop guy who was like, just like a workhorse, right? And
Tarek?
Tarek, yeah.
Yeah, we had him on here too.
Yeah, no, that's what I was saying, because I just listened to your last episode that was published. But, his success came from his effort, whereas the stock market is like almost the exact opposite, where it's like the less you do, the better, because the stock market's super efficient. And so you just put your money in, leave it, don't mess with it. The more you like try to pick and choose stocks or jump in and out of the market or do something smart, the more likely it is to burn you. Whereas the way to build wealth is just by investing consistently and leaving it for the market to work.
But being patient is also hard work of its own. Learning how to be patient with something. Because I think for real estate, it definitely is active hard work, but at least you kind of see your numbers growing versus in stocks. If you have it in just like a mutual fund or something really safe, you see it going up maybe like $5-10 a month or whatever it is. And you're just kind of like, okay, I want to like see it, you want to feel it. So how do you have like that patience? Is it just something that your parents taught you?
It's definitely not get rich quick. And I do think it's a matter of education. So for example, if you invest $250 a month over the course of 40 years, there's no period in American history in which that doesn't turn into over $1 million. Like the worst 40 years in history, $250 turns into $1 million. And, you know, the average 40 years is about 1.9 million. And if you invest more than 250, like if you did like $1,000 a month, then you'd be talking about $8 million over the course of your career. And for sure, early on, it doesn't feel like much. You know, if you like, if you get, you know, and the reason that works is because about a 10% annualized return is the average of the stock market. You know, if you put $1,000 a month in for a year, that's $12,000. And like, let's say you get your average 10% return, your 12,000 turns into, you know, 13,200. You get like a $1,200 growth. And, you know, seeing 12,000 turn into 13,200 isn't like flipper flop TV excitement material. It's like, you know, it's like this little tiny drop, but it's like the beginning of this compound growth, because the next year you invest again, and then that 1,200 from the previous year grows, plus the 12,000 from the previous year grows, plus all your new money grows. And then over time, it starts to compound. And 10 years in, you're like, okay, now I have a couple $100,000, and actually the growth is going even faster than your contributions are. So yeah, you know,
Can I ask about taxes? Because I don't know why, but when my stocks were up, because they were up significantly, I think it was like 2 years ago from when I initially put them in, because that's when we were at the peak. And I could have sold and made quite a bit of money, but I didn't because I was like nervous about taxes. So when you finally decide to sell at some point or retire or whatever, how do you like, is there a way to offset those taxes? Because that was my biggest thing, because I live in LA and my tax rate was like 50%. So I'm like, I'm just going to give half of this away. How do I not? Is there a way?
Okay, so first, you're only ever taxed on the gains. And so like, let's say you invest 50,000, it grows to 100,000, and then you sell. You're not taxed on 100,000, you're taxed just on the 50,000. You know, the best way to completely avoid those taxes is to invest inside of tax advantage accounts. That's an account like a Roth IRA. Any money you put into a Roth IRA grows 100% tax-free, never taxed again. You can like day trade to your heart's content, sell for gains, get dividends. Nothing inside of that account is taxed. That's like the benefit of the Roth IRA. Same for a 401k. Anything, you know, if you have a Roth 401k, for example, that again is never taxed again. If you have a traditional version, I know it gets a little bit complex, and I hate this stuff because it's like, these are government laws that are put to incentivize us citizens to invest for ourselves. But as is the federal government, it's not always the most simple thing in the world. But yeah, basically IRA, 401k are like the two places that normal employed people go to shovel money into where they're not taxing any of those gains. And I would also say, you know, taxes in general, there's a saying, you don't let the tail wag the dog. And so like, let's say you had a huge gain, you wouldn't, you know, not take your gain for fear of taxes. You know, you'd take your gain. You'd much rather, like, let's say you grew from 50 to 100,000 and then you have to pay tax, even if it's a 50% tax rate. Although to be fair, you know, you're not taxed at your income rate, you're taxed at the capital gains tax rate, which maxes out at 15 or 20% for federal.
Oh, okay.
So when you sell
what about
your stuff,
state?
California, unfortunately, you're in my beautiful sunny state of California where they don't differentiate between capital gains and income. And so if you are in a high tax bracket, you're going to get hit up with like 13.3%, I think is the top California tax bracket. So, you know, to be fair, it's like a high tax rate, but still you'd rather, like, if you pay a 33% tax between that 20% federal, and that's like if you're making like over $1 million or something, like this is a very high income tax bracket. But like, let's say you're in that highest tax bracket and you're paying 33%, you know, you'd much rather keep your 67% and then like lose it if, you know, but that said, like, I don't recommend timing the market. I don't think you necessarily should have sold, but I also don't think you probably should have been picking individual stocks and speculating in that way.
In the beginning, we talked about index funds. So is this your primary bread and butter? Is this what you recommend all your students? And what is an index fund?
Those are great questions. I love it. And so and I'm a simple man, and so I like breaking things down very simply. And so at its core, what we're really buying is a stock, and a stock is just a share of a piece of company, or a piece of a company. So for example, like we probably all have iPhones. I'm like looking at my iPhone right here. Apple sells a lot of iPhones and AirPods and everything else. And so you can buy a share of Apple. I think it's like $200 or something right now. And so when you buy a share of Apple, you're a part owner of the Apple Corporation that entitles you to dividends. As Apple profits, they pay quarterly dividends, so they deposit money to your account automatically. And then you can sell your share of Apple later, maybe for more money. And that's the two ways that stocks make money, by collecting dividends while you own them and then selling it for more later. But, you know, while Apple is a great company, no individual person can know if Apple is going to do better or worse than the other stocks, because the stock market is very, very efficient. If I were to buy a share of Apple, of course I know Apple is a good company, but whoever's selling me that share of Apple, since it's a marketplace, someone's selling it, they also know that Apple's a good company. That's not like lost on them. And in fact, we say the sum total of all human knowledge is priced into these stocks. And so, for example, if we expect Apple to release the iPhone 14 or 15 or whatever they're on, and we expect their profits to go up, we can't buy before it happens. The price is already higher,
right?
Based on
Speculation from other people.
Exactly. And so it's kind of like betting on a sports team against the spread. Even if one team is way better, the spread evens it out. So it's always kind of like an even bet. And so what do? Enter the mutual fund. A mutual fund is where, instead of buying individual stocks and speculating which one will do better, there's a smart manager where you just put your money into a fund. It's like a bank account, and the word mutual means a bunch of people. So like the three of us and all the listeners mutually put their money into this fund. And then a smart manager picks and chooses stocks for us, which is an improvement, because then we don't have to manage complex portfolios of all these different stocks and read the Wall Street Journal and try to guess what's going to do. But there's a problem, which is that manager has the same problem as we do, which is they also don't know which stocks can do the best. Yeah. And additionally, that's a challenge, because that manager has to make a living. And so they charge a fee for the service. And that's called an expense ratio that's associated with these mutual funds. And so a typical expense ratio for what's called an actively managed mutual fund, where this manager is picking and choosing stocks, is about 1% per year. So if you put in $10,000, you're going to pay $100 a year to this manager. And it turns out, it doesn't sound like a ton of money, but over time, if you go from a 10% return to a 9% return net of that fee, it can erode a third or a half of your total growth.
Wow.
So enter the index fund. What's an index fund? It's when you buy every single stock in the stock market. When this was introduced, it was a crazy idea. It was introduced by Jack Bogle, the founder of Vanguard, in the 70s. And he was kind of like mocked by his peers, because they're like, Jack, why would you buy the bad stocks? And his position was, since the stocks are all priced efficiently, the bad stocks are so cheap that if you buy one, maybe it's going to surprisingly outperform. And the good stocks are so expensive that if you buy one, maybe it's going to underperform. So instead, you just buy every stock, you diversify away any risk of owning individual investments, and then you guarantee yourself your fair share of all of the market growth. And index funds, because they're very simple, there's just a computer that buys the stocks for you automatically. Basically, their expense ratio, instead of like 1%, is usually around like 0.1% or lower, and some are even 0%. And so that's what I do. When I sold my company for millions of dollars, I took my millions, I bought a few index funds, and then I let them sit, and I do nothing. And so when COVID crash happened in 2020, I did nothing. And when 2022 happened and we had a bad year, I did nothing. And 2023, I'm doing nothing, but I'm collecting dividends all the time. And as the market eventually will grow, as it always will, because we're going to see record highs again soon, the value's going to go up.
But how has the S&P 500 held up? Because I have individual stocks, and my portfolio is probably down like 30, maybe 40% since I originally bought. So how is like the S&P held up over the last like 5 years? Is it down?
S&P the same as index funds.
Oh,
so yeah, the S&P 500 is an index. Index is just a fancy word for list. And so when I say index fund, I just mean like a list of all the stocks. Back in the day, like back in the 20s, there was the Dow Jones, which is like literally 30 stocks. And that back then they didn't have computers. And so someone would like painstakingly like write down the value of 30 stocks and average it out. And that was like a big innovation, because they could get a sense of the whole, they picked 30 representative stocks and they get a sense of the market. Then in like the 50s, the S&P 500 came out, where it's now technology was better and they could track 500 different stocks. And we still use that. We still use that index today, because it's like a good metric for the entire stock market. So, I don't know off the top of my head, but the answer is it's way up. So over the last 5 years, the S&P 500 is up 56.8%.
You're averaging all these companies. You look at oil, that skyrocketed, but you look at Tesla and that plummeted. So if you have all of them, you can still manage that positive return.
I see this like look of shock on Jessica's face, and I don't know. So I don't know what you did, but I can guess. And I guess what you did is you chased past performance, which is one of these sins. It's one of my 7 sins of investing. And what chasing past performance is around 2000, 2001, tech stocks were going nuts. You know, there was this woman named Kathy Wood who had this fund called the
Oh,
ARK
yeah,
fund.
I love Kathy Wood.
And like she was anointed the, you know, Queen of Wall Street or whatever, and she like knew, and I would watch interviews with her, and she would say things like, you know, technology is the future or something like that. I'm like, yeah, but we all know that, and you.
It was already priced in.
Right, it was already priced in, and so what happened is people chased past performance. So ARK fund, if you don't know, it's basically this like, you know, this active fund manager who picks and chooses stocks, decide that these specific tech stocks are going to do really well. And she was right for a long time, and that fund went way up. But the problem is, at the beginning, nobody was investing her fund.
Right.
Then the fund went way, way up, and everyone's like, oh, she's so smart. Then money poured in, and then the fund crashed. And so from its inception, the ARK fund has underperformed the index. She's done worse than picking all the stocks. But it gets worse than that because people weren't putting money in on day one. People were putting money at the top. And so while the market's up 50%, investors like you who are chased that past performance, bought high and then wrote it down, are actually down. They're much worse off. And so, you know, it's a hard lesson to learn because, again, it's different from real estate. Like with real estate, you can look at a property and analyze and say, okay, what rents could this bring in? What's the neighborhood like? And do a lot of, but with stocks, there's so few stocks relative to the billions of people on earth that everyone's doing this analysis on a very few stocks, and the prices are changing instantaneously. You know, there's not 5 million people bidding on any individual property, right? And that's why you can find inefficiencies in real estate where you're like, okay, this one seems like a good deal, this one seems like not a good deal. Whereas with stocks, those inefficiencies basically don't exist, but for really like, you know, PhDs, you know, there's literally like, for example, there are people who shoot satellites into space and orbit planet Earth, and these satellites take pictures of Tesla factories to count how many cars are coming off the Tesla factory line to figure out, is Tesla going to overperform or underperform their prediction for their next quarters? And, you know, those people maybe have an edge, you know? And so when you, as like an individual, were like, oh, I think Tesla's the future. It's like, you think Tesla's the future, of course, but some dude knows that Tesla's about to like miss their projection by like 40%, and that price is going to tank. And so like, you know, it's a dangerous game to like assume that.
How did you know that like 70% of my money is in Tesla?
Because I talk to people all day, and when you tell me that you're down 30 or 40% when the market's up 50%, there's not that many different companies that you could have bought that are performing that way. Plus, Tesla's just a very popular like consumer tech stock that people like to buy. Tesla's a perfectly good company, you know, but.
So you remind me a lot of, so my sister and also Warren Buffett. You remind me of both just because, you know, Warren Buffett is very, very frugal, and he really, he saved all his money, put it into S&P 500, said, I have a 10% return over the last 30 years. But where does it end? So my question for you is like, the reason that we love real estate, one, there's so many benefits, one, taxes, and B, the passive income aspect. So all of our money put into real estate, and then we can live on the passive income. And then we still have equity built in our property. But for you, you say that you're really frugal. You put all of your money into the S&P 500 and the index funds. So where does it end from there?
Like when will he make money?
Yeah, because it's the power of compound interest, and that's how my sister is. She saves every single dollar, puts it in, and it's compounding and compounding and compounding. So when do you start to get to see the benefit for you?
So like, when do you stop living frugally? I guess.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it gets a little bit cerebral, but I would say like I haven't had a job in, what am I, 42? I haven't had a job in 6 years. So like, that's nice. I travel whenever I want. I do whatever I want all day.
So do you take a certain percent out a year for you to live, or do you just always go back into compounding?
I do. And so there's basic, you know, the goal basically, in my opinion, is to build your investment portfolio up to a position where you can live off the growth and dividends forever. So one way is that there is income associated with index funds, which is index funds collect all those profit dividend payments from all the companies contained within, collect them and pay them to you usually quarterly. And so, you know, if you have, you know, my portfolio, I think pays like $50,000 or $60,000 a year just in dividend payments. So that's just like free. Nice. Like I don't have to sell a share for the rest of my life. Wow. And that just is cash deposited in my account. I don't have to like call about a toilet. I don't have to, you know, I don't have to do anything. It just,
God damn. Are you taxed?
Yeah, those dividends are taxed if they're not in a Roth IRA or
Okay.
but it's just taxed like incomes, just like
Okay.
your job is or whatever. But if it's in an
I
IRA or
always
401k,
wondered
it's
that
not.
because I was like, if I have $2 million, obviously, if that could pay me 200 grand a year, I can live forever. But I was like, I would take that 200 grand and use it. Then I wouldn't be compounding, building my 2 million. So you're saying you take dividends.
Right. And so the real answer is people smarter than me have looked very carefully at the historical volatility of the stock and bond market and inflation and tried to answer the question of how much can you take out per year and not go broke? You could for sure take the dividends out every year, but dividends right now are only paying about 2%, and so like that's not very inspiring. And you could just put the cash under your mattress and take out 1% for 100 years, and you will all be dead in 100 years, so that would be fine, right? So 2% is like a little too conservative. 10% is a little too aggressive because 10% is the average, and if we're like a bad 5-year run in the stock market and you're taking out 10%, you could erode 50% and have the rest, and you get to a point where basically it's not big enough to recover. And this number is called the safe withdrawal rate. And basically experts think that this is around 4 to 5%. And it depends where, how old you are and all this other stuff. But basically, for every $1 million you have invested, you can take 40 or 50,000 bucks out per year and even increase that for inflation as time goes on.
Okay.
So,
But you'd still be compounding and your money would still be growing at that rate, or you're just not losing?
It depends what the market does, but generally, if the market's going up 10% on average and you are taking 4%, yeah, you're still going to be building wealth, and you'll basically never go broke. And then but also like these things aren't done in a vacuum, right? It's not like if I have a $2 million portfolio and I'm taking out $80,000 a year, and then 10 years go by and it's like 1 million. I'm like, oh, maybe I should slow it down or whatever. But also people don't have no income usually forever. People who retire early often have other income. So I don't know. I guess like they're really good questions, but I think like the reality that I see on the ground is most people actually wait too long to retire. Like once you have enough that kicks off enough to cover your living expenses, the market's generally like well outpaces that, and other things happen, like you have some other income or whatever, and you could have retired even earlier. But yeah, that's what I do. I live off my portfolio.
Wow. I've learned so much.
I know.
I mean, yeah, I
This is
feel like I've
amazing.
always known this in the back of my head, but there's this part of me that's like, maybe I'm different from the rest and I know more. And I think that's what kills you is you think that you know something that other people don't know. And what I'm learning today is if everyone thinks that and everyone's investing in a Tesla and I invested when it was like whatever, super high, and now it's at a price where it's actually like realistic, that's not manageable long term.
Yeah, no, exactly. Like when you kind of like realize there's this like, you're like not betting on the team, you're betting against the spread, and the spread could be,
Right.
it's like, like let's say you're a Kansas City fan, the Super Bowl is coming up. I don't know if this is
Yeah,
on air
Chiefs.
before or after, but, and you're just like, they're super good, but then you're like, well, the spread's 600 points, so they have to win by 601 to win. You're like, well, I'm probably not going to, and so
Yeah.
basically that's where Tesla was. It's like Tesla, great team, probably
Yeah.
going to win the car game, but the spread's 600 points. And we're like, okay, well, they're
Right.
not going to beat Toyota by 600, like Toyota's
Yeah.
still going to make cars. And if like anything bulks, it's like, oh, like, Elon buys Twitter and people think he's crazy, or like Toyota like releases an electric car that has twice the range of Tesla or whatever. Then it's like, oh, it comes crashing back to earth and all that crazy expectation. And that's where you like lose money on those like high growth stocks.
So for us in real estate, unfortunately, that is still our passion and our growth, our way to wealth, because of the passive income, the equity build, and the tax benefits. And so my question would be, in this time frame right now, we're in a recessionary period. We're not buying until things are really, really down, and we can do the numbers and we know they're down. So in these next 2-year mark, could I park my money in S&P 500 or in an index fund and pull out when I find a great deal? Is it worth it to do that? Because I'm not getting that average 10%.
Right. Yeah. If she doesn't plan to invest in for 40 years, because she may need some of that money.
Yeah,
Right.
I pull out and buy a deal for real estate, so.
So there's kind of two answers. One is that I would never suggest timing the market. And so timing the market is kind of guessing when the market's going to go up and down. And nobody knows. Lots of people will say they know. You can read articles every single day. You can read them in newspapers or whatever that say, experts say we're going to see this slow growth for the next 10 years or whatever. But, I feel like every day someone sends me one of these articles and I was like, well, look at that article from 10 years ago. It was way off. And so all the speculation is always wrong.
Yeah.
And so for an individual, it means if you're trying to jump in and out of the market in a short time frame, and by short time frame, I mean like less than 5 years, you shouldn't be doing it. If you're looking at 5-10 years plus, you should absolutely be investing early and often. And so for you guys, like, you know, if I'm a real estate investor, I probably want to do both. I want to primarily do real estate because that's like my thing. But I say, hey, take a little bit off the table every month, just throw it into an index fund, leave it. And then, you know, in a decade or two, you might have $500,000 or whatever. And it's going to be nice to have that cash that just, that's not correlated to your real estate assets. For your short-term money.
Is king right now.
Yeah. For your short-term money that you might need in a year or two, you know, high yield savings accounts are paying over 4% now, which is kind of like the upside of the high rates. You know, you could do a more conservative portfolio of like bonds. Bonds are basically where you loan money to a government or a company and then they pay you back with interest. Bonds can be volatile too because you have to sell them later. But, you know, basically I wouldn't recommend dumping all your money in the S&P 500 for a year or two because, you know, 2 years from now, maybe home prices are a steal, but the market's dropped 30%. You're like, oh, well, shit, I lost 30% of my money. You know, I don't expect that's going to happen, but I don't know.
Yeah, you just never know.
Yeah, exactly. It's something that you have to, and that's what's so nerve-wracking with ours, but it is smart to say, like, okay, maybe if you have 100% of your portfolio, we are primarily real estate investors, let's do 20% that we
still pretty high, isn't it?
Index and hold forever, you know?
Yeah.
You know, they're both good. I often have people say like, what's better, real estate or index funds? And the answer is like, they're both good. They're different. You know, real estate is much more active. You're basically running a business. You have to like analyze properties and make deals and put renters in there or manage flips or whatever you're doing. With index funds, you literally go to like Fidelity or Vanguard's website and in 4 minutes you like open an account, you click buy, and then you just don't touch it for decades.
Yeah.
And so like it's like a very different like level of work involved. Although, you know, real estate has benefits, like you can use leverage, you can use loans to like maybe get outperforming returns, but you can also then
potentially burr out to bring our money and be acquiring. That's kind of the goal because then you have these assets with equity that you hopefully don't have anything into. That's the ultimate goal. So it's way more active, but I feel like definitely the upside
is potentially
reward, but there's a lot of risk.
Yeah, it can be, right? And so that's why I like doing both. You know, I think 20%, you know, I have probably 80 or 90% of my portfolio in just index funds, and then the rest some like syndicated real estate deals and other little stuff. And I feel very good about that and sleep like a baby, and no one calls me about toilets. And we don't.
We don't.
Especially in this time when we have these crazy payments, the market's tanking, and we're like, okay, we are barely swimming.
And then people that just consistently invested are like, I'll always be fine. That's the secret.
So what do you say, like, for someone with a normal job and, you know, maybe they make $100,000 a year, they're able to save that little bit of money. Why would they put it in an index fund rather than into their retirement fund that their company provides?
So the retirement fund their company provides is really, you know, these terms are confusing, and people often say like, what's better, a 401k or an index fund? A 401k is just an account. It's like a checking account or a savings account, but it's a fancy named account. You put money in there, but then that money is invested and grows. And so an index fund goes inside of your 401k. So if you are a regular person making $100,000 and you have a workplace retirement plan like a 401k or 403b or TSP or a simple IRA, those are just names of accounts. Index funds go inside of those accounts. You can also open up a regular investment account called a brokerage account and buy an index fund in there, or you could open up an individual retirement account, an IRA, and put an index fund in there. And the answer is, you know, you basically, which account you use is just a priority of tax matters.
So
and
the
you just
really not offering any benefit. They're just really saying like, let me do it for you. Let me take some of your income so that you're set for retirement. But they're really not offering any retirement money to you.
Well, it's tax free, right?
The system, you know, now I need to like rationalize why the US system is set this way. It's so stupid in my opinion. You know, basically the federal government back in the day said, hey, we want to encourage people to invest in, you know, stocks and mutual funds and index funds, but for some reason we're going to put the onus on companies. And so we say, hey, there's a tax break if you invest, but companies, you deal with it for your employees. And that's what a 401k is. So it says, hey, companies, if you set up this 401k plan, and I kind of hate the word plan because it sounds like it's a very complicated thing, but it's just an account. If you let your employees open up a 401k account, put money in and invest it, then they get a tax break. I don't like that system because if I am self-employed or work for a small business or whatever, I don't get the tax break that like,
right. But
that
you're
big
doing the
companies
same
do.
thing.
Right. Like, I don't know why the ability to get a tax break for investing is dependent on like whether or not my company decides to like anoint me with this. And companies use it as like a carrot to encourage, new employees or retain employees. But yeah, it's just an account that you invest in, and it has index funds and has tax advantages.
Wow. Okay. Because they always tell you, oh, you get a benefit. You always hear about the retirement plan, blah blah blah, that's setting up there. Like
Because it's tax free, that's a benefit.
Yeah, but as if the company's paying their retirement plan that they
right.
Some do offer what's called a match, and so like some say, hey, if you put in 5%, we'll put in 5% of your income. It's like, let's say you make $100,000. They say, hey, if you put $5,000 and we'll add a new $5,000 that wasn't part of your salary, and it kind of brings your total compensation to 105,000. Yeah, and so but it's just they could just pay that 5,000, and so but it's just an incentive to encourage you to invest. It's really weird that's set this way, but I guess it's the idea is that employers are supposed to like help coax their employees along to not be broke old people.
And then the smartest way you're saying to do it is, instead of just like investing the bare minimum like you do for a company, you take 5% of my income, is if you can live even more frugally and invest a good piece of your income to kind of speed up that process.
Yeah, for sure. The more you can invest, the better. In fact, like if you let's say you go nuts and you invest 50% of your take home pay. That's an extreme measure, of course. But if you make 80,000
$100,000 a year, and you
I made the mistake of thinking like it's always better to invest no matter what it is than it is to have your money in the bank account because of inflation. And so I did put like 70 to 80% of all of my income in stocks. And now when they're down and cash is king and I don't have the cash, I'm like, oh, they don't really prepare you for that. Like, you may need your money at some point and you can't just get it back.
Yeah,
so I think living to the point, like I've learned, you actually have to put in what you're okay with losing or what you're okay with not having access to.
Well, there's a few things there. One, in these retirement accounts like 401k IRA, they're designed to not take them out until you're 59 and a half years old. There's a way to get access to that, but for sure, if you're saving for a house or a boat or planning to spend it, you wouldn't put that money into a 401k IRA.
You need to have your boat fund.
Yeah, your boat fund, your house fund should be cash. But you can take, if you've invested in a regular brokerage account, you can take that money out anytime you want. But if you said don't invest money that you're not okay with losing. I would point out that index funds can't go to zero. So if you buy an S&P 500 index fund and it goes to zero, then your cash is also worthless. There's like fire raining from the sky. That means there's like no Google, there's no Amazon, there's no ExxonMobil, there's no FedEx, there's no Home Depot. When all those companies,
because when I pulled my mutual fund versus when it was like up, it was still down. I mean, I had $1,000 when I was a kid, and then it went to like when my parents got divorced when I was 5, they put $1,000 into a mutual fund. Then I had 25,000. So
your 1,000 turned into 25,000?
Yeah,
that's amazing.
Right? Yeah, that's amazing. What do you mean it went down? That's amazing. I would do that.
I mean, over 26 years.
Yeah.
But no, but I'm saying it was at 30. But when I pulled, it was at 25.
Yeah. So there's a difference between like the short-term volatility. Any given week, month, year, the market might, so 30 to 25,000 is just one of these little bumps in the road. But that's kind of a perfect example of like long time. We're talking 20, 25 years. There's never been a down 20, 25 years because those companies contained in that mutual fund are working, they're profiting, they're growing, they're innovating, they're sending their dividends back to you to be reinvested to continue to grow. And so any given moment, people are like, oh, Tesla's about to do bad. So there's like this built-in little volatility. And so one of the metaphors I like is people think that the stock market's like a yo-yo. It's like, oh, it's up and it's down. But it's really more like a yo-yo while you're walking up a set of stairs. And so for sure, any given step is going to feel like this bumpy ride. But when you zoom out, you're making this progress up the set of stairs. And so, you had that little yo from 30 to 25,000, but you had this big set of stairs from 1,000 to 25,000. And that's what, that's why it's like a long-term investment. You invest regularly over time to get that growth.
I like that analogy where you were like, if it's at zero, then it doesn't really matter because our world's probably over at that point.
Right.
I'm like, wow, you're right.
The bigger problems. The robots are taking over.
The robots are taking over. But
That
compared
might
to, like,
happen, but
one
like then we need
company,
like shotgun shells and canned goods and bottled water and stuff. That's gonna be the new
then we have
currency because
bigger
there's no
issues.
companies. Yeah.
Right. Also, amazing gift for anybody listening. I got my nephew when he was born. I gave him $1,000 into a mutual fund.
You
Like,
did?
So when I told my sister doesn't have, I was like, you're never allowed to touch it. It's in a mutual fund, and that's his college. Like over the next 20 years, hopefully before he goes to college, that will grow into being like, well, he'll have 25 grand to put towards his college that I gifted him at his baby shower.
You should always gift each other that.
Yeah.
Let's
Yeah.
do that. I've learned so much.
I'm glad that we had a little bit of switch up. We've only had 2 other guests that weren't real estate. And
Yeah.
this was really, really eye-opening. So anybody listening, you guys have to go check out Jeremy on Instagram. We'll link all of your stuff below so they can just easily find you. He gives a lot of really valuable information online.
Yeah, my brand is called Personal Finance Club, and you can find me on Personal Finance Club on Instagram or personalfinanceclub.com. And I've got like a free hour video on my homepage that says "Start Here." That just kind of walks through all the basics. You don't even need to put your email in or anything; just watch it. And yeah, I post daily facts about this stuff on Instagram. So yeah, that's how to get started.
Okay, well, we appreciate you so much, and we'll definitely stay in touch. And if you ever need anything in LA or,
Real estate
Nice.
advice, I don't know, we're here for you. We really appreciate you coming
Cool.
on, and I learned so much.
Thank you.
doing
I'm in
well.
San Diego, so we're neighbors.
Okay.
Nice. Okay, awesome. Well, enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll talk soon.
All right.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
guys. Great talking to you. Bye.